Hey everybody, it's Saturday, April 12th, and it's Tinderbox weekend with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox, and here is Michael Becker.
Hey everybody, welcome. Our typical format for Tinderbox meetups is we go around the room, have new people introduce themselves. We don't have anybody new today. We then dig into any projects we're working on and or a theme or both given time. Given that we have no theme, let's just talk about our projects. So who's working on what? Who wants to chime in with something? And Art, I'm going to put you on the spot. You were going to give us a demo of your workflow a while back. How's that coming along? All
So,
right. Like
sorry,
Art,
who is that for?
Can you hear
Art,
me?
Art,
Yeah.
there it is.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Actually, what I've been doing of late, I think the last month or so, is using Tinderbox in probably the most basic fashion possible. Like literally just a few notes and some attributes and prototypes, and just going back to extreme basics. But it's been great as just simply a way to lay out ideas and things like that.
All right. Who else has any other projects? Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, not a project. I was going to start typing this question into the chat, but since we don't have a program today, this has been on my mind recently. I've never really used linking in Tinderbox, and I understand it's a hypertext platform, and I'm trying to get my head around I approached it, I was attracted to it as kind of an outliner type of thing. So I'm trying to understand the value of links. Are links, so if I think about a link as like two notes and the link says supports or, it's some sort of characteristic of the relationship between those two notes. Um, could not those is that the value of the link, or is it strictly the navigational feature which wouldn't necessarily require a relationship designation? I'm fuzzy on the value of linking.
Okay. Well, linking certainly has a visual. One of my clients wants up. Okay. Linking certainly has a visual affordance that's beneficial. And it has and it's directional. So it's going from one way to another. And so that can be really helpful in thinking through, visually different types of relationships of how they're working with each other. Um, Linking also has the ability to cascade relationships. So note A is linked to note B, is linked to note C, is linked to note D. And so you can actually follow that linking path, get those linked relationships back, and then do whatever analysis you want with it.
Well,
And
see
in the
that okay, but now you've lost me already. What is the value of link A to B to C? Where what is the insight that is gleaned
Well,
from?
that depends on your project, obviously. But for example, if I'm doing product work and I want to see what capabilities within a product are linked or associated with this product versus a different product, and I'm doing comparisons to that, that could be one thing. The other thing you might want to think is if you're doing a network relationship of people or companies, you could say how many relationships away is this person from that person. So that would be another way to do that, and I've done that quite a bit. And then before Mark, before you comment, the one other thing I use for linking quite a bit, Dave, is to pass data back and forth between notes. So if this node is linked to that note, then I can pass context back and forth and populate attribute values up and down that chain.
So
So I could
that's
actually
the programmatic that is an architecture feature.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I'll do that quite a bit. For example, when I'm doing my emailing templates, I'll have a prototype called email. I'll create an email note. I'll add the name, Dave Rogers in as a recipient. I might add Philip Lloyd in as a recipient as well. Philip, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I haven't seen you in ages. Hopefully your daughter's doing well. Um, and then I have Tinderbox go out to those people notes link to those notes, and then bring the emails or their companies or associated data back to the email note. And so then that way too, later down the road, I can then take a look, and then let's say I go to the person note Dave Rogers in my file, I can go then see through the linking pane every single email Dave's ever gotten, every company Dave's associated with, every project I've associated Dave with. And so that's the other value I get from doing it. Mr. Bernstein.
Yeah, the most important thing about links under the hood is that they're very durable. As we know, we can move and rename notes. So references to notes by name or by path are potentially fragile in that the note may not be there, or in fact, you may move the note that used to be there somewhere else and put a completely new and different note under the name that was formerly occupied by the old note. And sometimes that's exactly what we want. It's like referring to someone by their office or their assignment, even though they might be different people. But sometimes we really want to have a connection that lasts between this note and some other note, which might move to a different place and get a new name, but we really want that connection. For example, if I have something that is based on an interview I conducted, I really want to record that this is derived from an interview. It's not something I made up, and it's this interview and not someone else's interview on the same date or some.
Did Mark freeze for anybody else?
He did.
Whoops, I'm seeing people.
Yeah.
Are you
Okay, you're
there?
back. You're back.
Now it tells me my internet connection is unstable. Suppose that I have, yes. So suppose that I have a piece of technology like my home automation system, and I represent its components with links, and they have components in turn that have links. I can use those links to ask queries like, do any, what happens if I can't buy replacements from China? This being a question on many people's minds.
So that what I just heard you describe is you want the permanent connection between two notes because you may be moving the document. So again, that to me is an architecture infrastructure sort of feature. And that is easier for me to get my head around than the types of links where we give names to them and what the relationship it is that they document. I was wondering if this isn't like something like sets, so that you could actually replace much of the linking value with attributes, and that notes sharing a relationship share attributes and then are gathered by an agent or through some other mechanism is in a set.
So Dave, let me give you an example on that one. So two comments. One is the naming of links can be very, very useful because using action code, you can actually discern and find notes based on link types, aka the names, and act on only those notes that have those links with that name. So that's one example. In qualitative research, that can be really, really useful, especially like discourse graphs, when you're thinking about the different associations you have with the different arguments you have. So, for example, these sets of notes support the argument. These sets of notes do not support the argument. These sets of notes are questionable. And so then that helps you kind of discern the different sets of notes that are helping you actually develop an argument. So that can be really, really useful. So there's a number of different plays there that can be quite helpful.
Art's got his hand up.
Yeah, hey guys, I just have a quick question on the stickiness of link creation. So, if I create a particular kind of link and I say this is a say a disagree type link, I notice that every subsequent link that I make between notes defaults to the last sort of link type that I created,
And
and
that's
that's the default behavior. Is there any way to sort of have it always go back to I say untitled link instead of picking the last one?
I don't think so.
There is not, but simply making the next link untitled will reset the default to untitled.
Oh,
So that's approximately the same the same amount of work.
okay. I actually thought that it didn't happen for me that way, but then now that you mentioned this, I will intentionally do it a couple of times just to recheck.
It should.
Okay, fine, thanks.
Okay. And then let's do Mark Anderson and then Dave. You mentioned in the chat, should we possibly pull up a file and play with some linking for a bit?
Well,
Like
briefly before
Oh.
Mark, it was like the what are the values of
Oh, yeah.
of links and in what context?
Well, let me give you another. That's the thought I had before Mark goes to. The other thought I had is I do this a lot. So I have notes that automatically create links, create notes for me. So, for example, I populate term values and it will go off and create term links for me. What I'll want to do is aggregate a bunch of like terms into a category. And then I'll add it. And so there's another prototype called categories. And then I'll aggregate a bunch of other terms, categories into themes. And so then I can actually look, say, in hyperbolic view, here are themes, here are categories, here are terms, and cascade up and down that chain. And then because of the linking, I actually have set attributes get populated with, so when I roll up to a theme, I can actually look at that individual theme note and say, here's the theme name, here are its 4 or 5 categories that are related to the theme, and here are the 20 terms that are related to that theme. And then I can act against that. So it gets really powerful that way. And then you can create glossaries and print them out and do all of that through that process. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I would actually briefly for Art's point, the reason it works the way it does is it was designed for fast note taking. So if you're noting one thing to another, you might want to keep going with that flow. But as Mark Manson's just explained, you can change that. But I just throw that in case you're wondering, well, why would it do that? So that's that. The thing I was thinking listening to this is that there is a slight danger of thinking, well, do I have to use notes? The answer is, sorry, links. Do I have to? Well, not necessarily. So if you aren't feeling the need for them, you're not necessarily missing out. And to a certain extent, depending on how you work within your Tinderbox, also you can, for instance, because you can query in and say, well, show me, give me a list of all the notes that have this value of some attributes. That, in a sense, is something you can do alternately by a link. So if you're listening to this saying, oh gosh, I'm not using links, so I should get I should get up to speed and do that. I wouldn't rush to think it's a necessity. It partly goes down to what you're doing and the way in which you use the app. So for instance, if you're using the map, if you primarily like to work in the map, you might find if you sort of did links for everything, you might find you've got an awful lot of links. Now, you can also set links to be invisible, or not visible, should I say. So it's a toggleable feature, and you can set it broadly by link type. And I think more recently, you can actually set it on the individual link. Though the trouble when doing that is actually you're in charge of remembering that you hid it if you want to see it again. Because by and large, it's in our nature that if we can't see it, we assume it's not there. So, for instance, if you're using a map, you might want some links to have real salience visually on the map, and you might capture other relationships by holding attribute values. I just make that point so that, like so many parts of the application, there isn't a one right way to use it because different people are doing different things. in different parts of the app. One place where links really do shine, if you go down that especially typed links, is hyperbolic view, which is less seen. But what it does is it basically, as long as you start with a note that is actually linked by the link type that you want to investigate, it will show you all the notes linked out from that note. It runs out, it actually clips off at about 7 notes, because for practical reasons, when we were testing it, it turns out that you probably don't want to see everything. If it's that big, you're going to have other problems, and the quality of what you get back from the view is lessened. But essentially, because you can move from note to note to note within that view, you can still walk along the link. And even if you can walk down as it were, a path of 20 notes, you won't see the entire 20 in the view at one time, but you can still go along that. I put a note in the sidebar as well. There is because I heard this phrase, well, how far away is something? There are a set of operators called, there's neighbors, neighbors to, neighbors within scope, and neighbors to within scope. The detail of what those do is in ATBRef, but essentially you can sort of say, what are all the notes within 4 links of me, or some note that are, and you might say, but are of type such and such. Again, like all these things, it's not everybody's need, and one shouldn't rush to say, I'm not using this, I'm not getting my full value out of the app. But if you want to investigate links you've created, there's some real richness behind it. And somebody also asked, well, can I effectively make hierarchical links and turn my outline essentially and do what a mind map does? Yes and no. You can make the links. What you can't do is you can't easily flatten everything into one map like a mind map. You'd actually have to promote all the descendants of the root level of that branch to be siblings in the same map, and then you'd see all the links, because links are only fully plotted between 2 notes that are in the same container. Otherwise, you see a little outbound or inbound link stub. An exception is hyperbolic view, which just doesn't look at the outline or anything at all. It's simply looking at links. So it draws all the things that are linked to it. And it's in a non-Euclidean hyperbolic space anyway. I'm not sure if that's helped, but that's a bit more information about it. Dave, does that help at all?
Yeah, I think the word link, it's 4 letters, and it seems to encompass a whole galaxy of different ideas. If you think of a hierarchical wiring diagram, the wires don't really mean anything. I mean, they kind of guide you from one position to the next. I guess there's some implicit meaning in that, but we use link to describe a navigation feature. We use link to describe some affordance that facilitates automation. And we also use it to describe somehow its relationship. And then there's the whole notion of the graph and some insight that can be gleaned from the graph. I just wonder if I'm missing a whole thing. And that's why I kind of raised the question. I have never really relied on links, and I'm perhaps one of those people. But that's why, if we're not talking about anything else today, I'd like to kind of educate myself a little bit.
It looks like other Mark's about to say something, or not. Sorry, so the answer is no. I don't actually think you're missing out. The other thing is, for instance, with your journaling that you're doing in the captain's log, you probably don't necessarily for that journaling process, you don't necessarily need links for it to be more meaningful to yourself. Now, you might have other things you want to do with that resource, because over time you built this large resource of things. And you might start putting in a sense, putting links in for that. But, Tinderbox, as flexible about this as anything else. You can put the links in any time. You can take them out again if you don't want them. And there are automated ways to do it with link to and unlinked to. And there's a to and a from method for each of those. So one of the joys of having something that supports this sort of incremental formalization and formalization of things is it doesn't really matter. There is no one right way. So certainly I don't think you should sit thinking that you're not getting all you could out of it. The tell will probably be that if you're trying
I'm
to
paying
answer
big
something
money for
and
this.
you're not getting it, maybe, just maybe, that's sort of saying, well, try a link, see what happens.
Art.
Yeah, I was also going to bring up, and I'm not sure, Michael, if you had mentioned it when you were sort of scoping out links initially, is that when you create backlinks between text within notes, you're also effectively creating a link rubric fabric in your document, which perhaps for you, Dave, in terms of your captain's log, if you're actually doing hypertextual link paths, you are then able to leverage those.
Sorry, was there a question there? I missed it.
No, just a comment.
Yeah. Yeah. So so that's the traditional hypertext model where you're creating, you choose your own story paths as you create links within text. So that's I did not mention that, and I was going to. So thanks, Art.
No worries.
And that's and we use the parking lot method or zip link methods to create those kind of internal text links. All right, Peter.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out a way to automatically associate stacked context with notes as I'm creating them. And what I'd have is I'd be working on a project, so I'd want to have every note created automatically linked to the current project. Then I'll be working with a resource. I have a book in front of me. So then I'd also want all notes I'm going to be creating linked to the book that's currently in front of me. Then I'd be in a section or a chapter in the book, and I'd want to be able to indicate that, okay, so now I'm in project A, I'm in book whatever, chapter 3. So then as I'm creating notes, all those notes would automatically be linked both to chapter 3, the book, the chapter 3, the link to chapter 3 in the book, a link directly to the book, and also a link to the project that I'm working at the time. And also I'd like to be able to have a task that I'm working on at the time and automatically have new notes linked to those. So like 4 pieces of independent contextual state that I want to have automatically tied to new notes as I'm creating them.
Okay.
How would you go about doing that?
There is 2 approaches immediately come off the top of my head. One is using the automagical create functions that I do where you populate attribute values and then that creates notes. The easiest approach would be an on add, in my opinion, where as you're adding notes to a container, you use the link to or link from action code. And then you could say, link to my parent. Or up the chain, if you'd like. So, that would be an approach. We could pull up a file and try to demonstrate that if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
All right, so let's pull up a Tinderbox note here.
And Peter, could I ask, are these links a navigation feature, or will they be used in a map view to kind of explore a relationship? What is the value of the links in your use case?
Navigation, so that I could jump directly from the note up to the task I was working on, or the topic, or the chapter, and then be able to jump from there to everything else connected to that.
So Peter, let's map it out. So you've got, say, project A and project B. And what do you have underneath those?
Okay, I have a task which could be independent of projects too. So I could be, looking for connections between World's Fairs and theme parks. So that could be a task.
Okay.
So that's under project A. Then I could have different books. I could say book A, book B.
Okay.
And then once I have one of those books in front of me now, I'm going to start going through the book. So I'll be starting in, maybe section 1 could be early history, could be the title of it. So now I'm working in the section of the book. Then I'm in chapter 2 in the section. And now as I'm going through chapter 2, I'm going to be creating notes as I'm going, reading through chapter 2. And I want to have that context automatically linked to the note so I don't have to go retyping it and manually populating as I'm going.
Got it. So would you see yourself building a structure like this?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the faster ways to do that, and a lot of the times too, eventually at some point you could put them in edicts or you put them in rules. But initially, as you're experimenting to see what works, start with a stamp, and then if the stamp works, then you can put them into the on-add edicts or rules. Is often a good way to do it, especially when you've already have some existing structure on that.
Because
So
also now say I'm in chapter 2, and I see something that references something. Now that might cause me to pause working on chapter 2 of book B and grab book A, and then look something up in the index of book A, and then I want to have that context associated with it when I make the note from the thing I find in book A that the reason I got to book A
whoa,
is
whoa,
because
whoa,
I was
whoa,
in,
whoa, whoa, slow down, slow down. Okay.
you
So
know,
you're
so then
right,
chapter 2
right.
led me to book A, and
Okay, so let's just walk that
so
through.
it's sort of like a context stack.
So I got some stuff I was learning about chapter 2.
Right.
And that inspired an idea in your head. And you
Right.
went
To go back to book A and look it up in book A.
And now are you looking up a note in book A, or did you physically
I
grab?
I'll physically go to the index and book A. Maybe it references somebody. Say Buzz Price's name comes up in book B. So I'm going to go to book A and check in the index to see, did book A talk about Buzz Price? And then I'll find the page and section in book A talking about Buzz Price. So I'll write a note there. And then I want to make sure that's automatically getting linked back to, how did I wind up going to book A and deciding to look up Buzz Price in book A? Well, that should be linked back to my note from chapter 2 of book B, which was where I got the idea that made me switch between resources.
Right. So let's start with the simplest thing, and then when we're done, I'll show you some of the ways I've automated this. But so you've got this name like Buzz Price, right? So what immediately comes to my mind too is, if you're thinking in the lines of like the Zettelkasten world as well, might you not want a note called Buzz Price too, because that clearly is an important entity that you might want to be taking notes on, not just the
Definitely. Yes, definitely.
right. So that's where some of this automation strategy comes into play. But let's play with your linking first. So and again, I'm just going to do this on the fly because I'm not looking at ATB link to parent. So if we could say, I think all you need to do is go link to parent, I guess, right? So if I do that and I hit apply and I hit Command 7, I've now linked to parent, right? And then if I wanted to actually give it a link type, I believe it's the second argument, is that right? Let's call it, I don't know, insight. Yeah, and so now I've created another link to parent insight. And so now that I know that that code works, if I wanted to, I could come up and do an on add and say like that. So then every time I'm now adding a child to that note, that link automatically happens.
Very good.
Right. So that is and then obviously I wouldn't put the colon there. You can mess with that later. But that's a really effective way to do it. And then so that way when you're later like, okay, let's jump up to chapter 2, that's the navigation, Dave, where that comes into play. And
Yeah, can you show, I zoomed in, I may have missed it. How do you navigate with links? And
you hit Command 7 and that opens up the linked pane, and then you can click like this. Now the other value with doing that too, and I don't know if you noticed that, let's say, and I'll show you how to automate this in just a minute, but let's say I had and you guys have seen me do this countless times now over the years, but I've got people folder and I've got Buzz Price here, right? So I've got a person that's buried down into this tree, and up in this note, I'm linking this person to Buzz Price, this note to Buzz Price. There's a lot of ways to do that. Because I've got that selected, I could use the parking lot and just drag that over to Buzz Price, give it a name, right? And I've now just created a person note to Buzz Price. And
Of
so
course,
that,
ideally, I'd want any notes that reference Buzz Price anywhere to automatically get linked back to Buzz Price.
okay, now here's a really cool thing about that. Now let's pause there. Let me explain this. So I'm going up to the file menu now. Let me turn on my desk pad. This will be easier so we don't have to explain it. I'm going to change my sharing. Stop sharing this. Share this. And then this way I can pull that on the screen. Okay. So now if you go up to the file menu, and I have to remember the syntax just a second. Because I don't do it often enough to remember all of it. So if I'm in the file menu, go up to the file menu, click in built-in hints, and let's add Buzz Price up here in. Come on. All right, let's add Buzz Price here too. Okay. Get rid of the typo. Then while we're at it, let's create a prototype to start making this a little bit easier. So then all of these are going to get no prototypes. And let's add the person in one just to make that easier because it's a person. And then we'll create my P folder. Just to make this helps with the just badges can be really, really helpful for your visuals as you're doing things like this. So you can see what's working against what. And then these are projects. Okay, so now we kind of got a general more sense of what's going on. And what we want to do now is, what was I doing? Oh, hang on just a minute. I gotta close the door. Sorry, gardener showed up, had to get the dogs out of that. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is, I'm sorry, I got distracted. What was your question? Where were we? We were.
Okay, we're automatically linking.
We're doing
Buzz
taggers.
Price anywhere.
Yeah, got it. We're doing taggers. So you go up to taggers and let's create a new note called like natural language person. And what happens here with taggers is you can create your own dedicated attribute for this, like natural language person. And we'll make it a set so that's unique. And then you can like look at the examples here. So essentially you can do examples like, actually this is not the right way to do it. Well, it could be. Yeah, you could put in patterns like if Buzz Price is in the text. This is a simpler way to do it. This is not the best way to do it, but you could do like would that be the right way to do it? You could just do like if Buzz Price is in the text, populate with Buzz Price. There's a couple ways to do it too. And then another pattern you might be following is like important person Buzz Price. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Right. And so then what you do is on the people note, we go to quick stamp, we type syntax. Is it highlighting syntax? What's the tagger? I don't remember. God. What is, I have to look it up in ATB ref. What's the if we want to make sure that the note's tagging, I don't remember what, I know how to do the highlighting, I don't remember the tagger.
Could we automatically populate the tagger with the titles of any notes that have the prototype person?
Let's stick with one thing at a time.
Okay, getting too meta there.
You are. I gotta look it up real quick. This is the benefit of ATB ref. Why don't we collectively do that together? So we go to here, we find taggers and tagger file syntax. Right, so what tagger is going to do is it's going to look for notes and tag your notes, but I don't remember how to set it up. Oh, I think that one happens automatically. So if I go like this, so I've got a note named natural language person, and I've got an attribute of the same name. So that note now becomes dedicated. So we'll say p note natural language person. I'm getting my my highlighter and tagger mixed up, which I'll show you highlighters in a minute while we're at it. So the reason why this is grayed out and you can't actually edit it is the taggers functionality has taken over control of it, and it's going to be automatically populating that note when it finds notes that meet this particular pattern. So if we go back up here now, and sometimes you have to close the file for the engine to restart. So let's go ahead and go ahead and close the file and reopen it and see if that works. All right, yeah. So you see, because Buzz Price is in the note, and the pattern saying when you see Buzz Price in the note, automatically add Buzz Price. So that, and so you can put multiple taggers on a multiple note, and so then what you could do is then you could you could do a link to action that says, you know, every time Buzz Price is in this note, link to the Buzz Price note. So those are other ways about going about doing that.
Okay, multiple taggers on multiple notes. You lost me there.
So let's say I have, let's do another pattern. Let's take this one, put it in this one. So NL tags is important person, like, and you can name it whatever you want. So now if I go here and I say, I also want to be seeing NL tags here. And again, I think we need to force it to go faster. If we give it time and patience, it would go. Important person Buzz Price, is Buzz Price in that? Okay, I'm expecting Buzz Price to show up here, but I'm not sure why it's not. Or I'm expecting important person to show up there. You can chime in, Mark, if I'm to figure out why I'm not seeing important person here as I expect. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bernstein.
No, let me check it.
Right, but that's that way to do that. And then what you could do is you could create a method, Peter, that says, for each note in natural language person, create to that note, and we can just do that while Mark's doing that checking there. You could do a quick stamp that says link to natural language person, and so you could say natural language person dot each X. Okay, and then you would say 1, 2, 3, link to X. Right, and again, the X is a variable that could be anything. It could be a person. It's whatever helps you with your logic as you're doing it. So essentially, this is saying for each item in natural language person, link to that note. And so then if we apply that, you'll see that Buzz is linking to that person, and then we can go ahead and give it a type 2 person, do it again, and you'll now see, oops, not a period, comma. Let's delete, oh, and we already have that one, so there, let's go ahead and delete it. There you go. And so now you're having the action code automatically linking to that anytime that Buzz Price shows up in the natural language person note.
Ah, very good. Now,
Okay.
how do we capture the notion of the current task that I'm working on so that everything that I do during work on the current task will get linked in. So that's independent of the book hierarchy that we're putting the notes in.
Again, help me with context. Where would current task? Where would you put a note called current task?
I may
Right.
just have a note called context, and then under context, I could have the current task that I'm working on, the project, a couple other things related. Basically, I want to capture whatever the current context is that I'm working in when I create the note and get that linked. So maybe there should just like a context note.
Well, I mean, it depends. Again, this completely depends on your workflow. So if it's easier for you, you could just create notes like this task, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so you'd have a prototype called P task.
Um,
Right. And then let me get an inbox. Right. And then what you do, it depends. It depends on how you want to work. So you've got a task, and you could have that. You could then have that task grab the on add like it just did.
Because basically what I want to do is get a temporal record of what my research process was. So one task could be, note taking off of book one, but then partway through something happens that causes me to sidetrack and jump to a different task. So I'm sort of like stacking interruptions, and I want to have a record of what I was currently doing in that stack of interruptions. So then once I finish whatever the subtask is I'm working at the moment, I can get back to the context that I was in before I started work on the tangent.
Okay, I think I'm misunderstanding the term task or that maybe Chuck's got a comment.
Yeah, I've been dealing with that issue myself recently. So the way I've been handling that is I actually do have a note that's, placed where I put all of my context and configuration notes. And I have a stamp that says, okay, I'm in this state. I want this note to be maintained for context. And then I can perform other actions, either stamps or just automated actions, and they will all apply to what the context is. And then when I want to go to a different context, I just invoke the stamp to say, now I'm over here. So that's a simple approach, and I think it actually works in a lot of cases. And you could get a little bit more elaborate if you were, you could have a stamp that says, capture my current context and save it so that I can come back to it later. But again, you need to have the idea of a single note somewhere where you have attributes or other methods of taking the context that you want to deal with and setting it aside and remembering it so that you can later with automation or with stamps come back and get there again. And
hey, Chuck, I just gave you remote control. You wanna set that up for us and let us see what that
I'm not in a good position to do that at the moment. It is in the latest version of the diagram view, which I'm about
no, I'm asking, no, not sharing your screen. Could you add that idea to the file that we have on screen right now?
Oh, you want me to?
You have remote control. Go ahead and control the file. And
I don't think I do.
I said I gave
what do I need to do something here?
I gave you allowed to control. Oh, not I gave you the wrong. I gave you allowed to record. You need to request control. So if you go to the top of the screen, you can request control, and I'll give you access, and you can control it.
Okay.
Okay, so basically to give just a little bit of context to the context thing, I really think of my context as being a stack because I get interrupted, so I push what I'm working on onto the stack, and then I start doing the new thing, and then something will sidetrack me, so I'll want to push what I was working on then, and then work on that tangent, and then when I close the tangent, I want to slowly work my way back out until I eventually get back up to where I was when I first started. So it's trying to capture that history of being interrupted and going off to do something different so that as I'm creating notes along the way, they get associated with the appropriate current interruption that I was working on when the note was created.
Sounds like agents. You could, track the modified attribute or created and within a given hour or something.
All right, so if you want me to try and demonstrate something,
Yep.
I'm just creating a top level folder for convenience, global context. I'll create a subfolder, which will be, I'll just call it current position. And then I would add a stamp. Let's see, would you have stamps in here already? Yes. So I would add a stamp, and I call it set position. And for jollies, I would just do something like this. I would say in this stamp, I would say $, my string equals $ path. Except I want my string to be this note here, so I can just capture note path, come back to the stamp. Put a semicolon.
Would you want to add a line break too?
No, I'm just starting with something really simple. So all I'm saying is, if I now go over to chapter 2, and I go to your stamps menu and I say set position, I go to current position and I show my string, you'll see that I've now captured that path. So you can just use stamps to basically mark your places as you go along. You have different ways of doing that, but once I think that concept is understood, you can do that a lot. I'll give an example in case it means anything. One of the things I've just added to the diagram view is the ability to select a bunch of notes and add them all to the same diagram. Well, I don't have any way of interacting with the user in that process. So what I do is I have a stamp that says current diagram is. And when you set that, you basically select the diagram you want to be adding notes to, set it as the current diagram. Now you can go and select a bunch of other notes, and then in one stamp, it will apply to all those notes and put all of them in that diagram. So simple operations like that. But you can also use it as just a way of capturing your breadcrumbs as you go along. So, I used my string, but you could also have done something like my text and just keep adding text to go along. And then again, you can have automation start looking for ways to backtrack in that trail that you've got. So, it kind of depends on how you want to move around and how you want to organize things. But if you go to your original position, you say you're in book A, and you say, I'm going to be doing a bunch of things in book A, but I want to come back to where I am, and I want everything that I do leaving book A to come back and provide links. I would start by setting a stamp that says context is book A. And then as you go along, as you do various things, you can keep using that context to keep putting links back to book A, or making other adjustments. Or you can actually go off somewhere else in your document and you say, I want to return to wherever I was, and have it go back to where you were originally. So it's a little bit of like what you can do with a browser, but you're putting it under your own control. And again, I can't speak for what you exactly want to do, but I think the mechanism is there to do it. Hope that helps.
Yeah, because basically I want to keep track of the stacked context that I'm working in as I'm creating the notes.
Right. And because you're using the term stack, you could easily set up a set or a list and just keep putting things on it. And then you could, as you move backwards, you could pop the items off of that list. And the items could be path names. They could be the IDs of notes you want to get back to, which I kind of recommend as a preferred way of doing it, so you don't always have to remember, the structure of your paths. But again, if you got an ID and you want to know what the path is, just ask path parentheses ID, and you can get back to that as well. So there are a variety of ways of doing it. I guess I would sort of look at how you want to proceed and say, how do I want to say I'm here? And then how do you say I want to get back to where I was? And once that makes sense to you, once you've got a flow that makes sense, it should be pretty easy to establish stamps or other automation that would handle that for you. But you can certainly use links. You could use a dictionary if you wanted to. So you could have a dictionary that maps, just does a lookup. You said, if I was here, I want to be using this kind of link, for instance. And so every time you at that position, you'll create a link of a particular type, and then you later move somewhere else, and you can have a dictionary look up what type of link you want to use there. Those are just some ideas. I'm just throwing out ideas, if that's helpful.
Yep. Oh, also, I have just like a general workflow question. Do you find it easier when you're doing book notes to start with the reference to the book in Tinderbox, then create a formal citation for it in Bookends and link it? Or do you find it easier to create the citations in Bookends first and then bring them into Tinderbox second? You sort of, what order do you balance working in the citation manager and Tinderbox for notes related to the citations?
I think I'd refer to Michael on that. Michael does so much more of that than I do. I just comment, Mark Bernstein made a good point in the chat session, which is you can also use agents and aliases as a way of keeping track of things. And I think that's another very effective technique. So there are a variety of ways of doing what you want to do. I guess, I would do a flow chart or some other kind of heuristic mechanism for describing the way you want to traverse things. And once you figure out what that is and what context you want to capture as you're doing the traversal, you should then be able to find a mechanism that works for you. And it could be a combination of aliases and with agents to find them, or it could be a combination of aliases just established by automation as you go along. It could be a linked list. It could be a dictionary. It could be using links themselves as a way of keeping track of it. So it's a very rich palette of tools you've got to work with, but it starts with understanding how you want to work. And once you lay that out, and once you define the journey you want to take and how you want to keep track of where you're going, it should be reasonably straightforward to figure out what set of those mechanisms would work for you. And I'll give up screen control here. Back to you, Michael.
Yeah, to answer your question, Peter, I don't think it really matters. You just want to create for me, and I don't know what you mean by bring back into Tinderbox. So for me, when I work with a citation manager, I just have an attribute called citation key.
I certainly, as
Right.
Doing a lot of citation work at the moment, I would suggest that reference managers are so-called because that's what they do. And to avoid the garbage in, garbage out syndrome, I always, over time, I get the data clean, tested in the reference manager, so that just last night when I was adding about 20, 30 references to somebody else's work, I could just pull them out, and I didn't give a second thought as are they complete, are they tested, are they up to date? If you were to start the Tinderbox end, it's fine. You'll have some information, but it's not going to necessarily tell you whether you've bothered to check it. It's one thing to know about something. It's another to get to the point where, if you're doing academic communication, where if you're being a good fellow, you will actually provide accurate and complete information. So the place to do that is the reference manager. So
yeah, again,
unless that's unnecessary, I would start with in the reference manager, and then you can essentially put your working link back into Tinderbox, and you can do all the other things you want to do with it. safe in the knowledge that if you actually need the real citation, it's safely done and ready to go in your reference manager.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
A couple of quick points also on the things being made. One is on modify. Just to be aware that modify basically is altered by editing title, text, or any displayed attributes. So it is possible to do things that don't necessarily get picked up by modified. And this leads me on to my next point, that in this whole thing of context tracking, less is probably more. It's a bit like saying he's wasting a whole day writing a regex, which still doesn't quite solve the problem. You think that the next, by a bit more Baroque addition around it, you'll get there. So, but I would stop myself and say, what am I really, really trying to track? So I think, lightweight thing like having, for instance, building a list of places you've gone, because here's another thing. When you, this is something that came up when there was a discussion about sort of tracking selection and how many times has this note been visited. Well, you might just click a link because you did it by accident. But there isn't a thing said, I clicked this by accident. I want to drop down by one. So you just have to live with the fact that there is an uncertainty. And also your brain thinks you've selected something, but you haven't actually done anything on the user interface. So be honest with yourself about what you can actually track. And I think that will give you a more robust, whatever method however sort of complex you make it, it should be a better fit for you. Otherwise, the tendency is to just go mad. More, you want to do this, you add automation, and now you have two problems. You've got the thing you're trying to do, and now you're trying to make the now you're trying to make the tracking for it work. So I just circle back. Just be wary of rushing into automation unless you're absolutely certain it's going to actually render you a usefulness. It's not the automation bits, nuts and bolts don't work. It's more that it's whether it actually really captures the thing you thought you were capturing.
All right. Peter, does that help?
Yeah. Let's see.
I'll show you.
Is there a way to capture just the last time that I clicked on a note?
Well, yeah, what you could do is
Not changing anything, but say I have, let's say I come up with a whole bunch of tasks, and I have a folder full of tasks, and I'm jumping back and forth between them. Can I get it so that I sort the items in the folder based upon the last time that note had been selected?
Yeah, so I would do it this way. So let's build this up real quick. Where's the hints folder? Here we go. I'm going to visit notes.
Because then I could just basically, click on the task that I'm going to be working on now and have it automatically figure out that was the current task.
I say text, text equals typos. What I call it on is it history. What I call it equals p path, and you could actually have like, we'll just mock it up for now. You can refine it later. Date now plus space plus, right? So let's say you had that as your stamp, and then you go to p note, and we add this on, and they're on visit. Unlike the rule remove feature, on visit doesn't have a place in the UI yet. So we'll say on visit. You could say stamp. Right. So what that happens is if I did this right. Oh no. Yeah, so we go up here and I click on that note. I don't think I did it right. Just a minute. Because I didn't enter it.
Michael, I think you have an extra space in your path.
Your
original path, I think there's two spaces back.
Where?
Under global context.
Oh yeah, it does look like there were two spaces between global and context.
I think
No.
not there on your when you were creating your stamp.
Stamp text.
Here?
Yeah, isn't there between global and context? No. Between
No,
the words global and context, don't you have two?
no, no,
No, that
no.
wasn't.
I just hadn't hit save. I didn't hit enter when I did this. So now that that's entered, when I go visit,
It's worth noting that when you say on visit doesn't have place in the UI, it's actually there because it's partly due to the common code base being used for story space and for Tinderbox. In story space, on visit has a meaning that is used when you're writing a hypertext where you're doing link traversal and you want to trigger various like logic when you arrive, what happens. So it
Michael,
wasn't
history.
originally designed. It wasn't designed for the purpose you're using it for. You can use it, but I would tend to use it with caution because there's a danger in assuming parts of the feature that you don't know are there.
Michael, history is misspelled under
Yeah,
your
I
on
think
visit
that's
history. Does that do it?
yeah, that should do it. Well, if I misspelled it, absolutely does. So I visited note 1, and if I go down here, you'll see I'm getting an ID now. That's interesting. Why did I get an ID? Date now plus path. Let's do next one.
That's the timestamp.
Oh, that's the timestamp. Got it. But I'm not getting the path of. Let's format the timestamp then. Oh, I know why. I got to do the plus equals here. No, this one. Plus equals. Let's do a format dot format. I don't know. Day, month, year. All right, so now we do that. And so you see I'm getting, okay, and then I got to do a
New line.
yeah, I know. Just enable shortcut type Siri. Don't ask again. All right. Global, blah, blah, blah. I thought I had new line here. Let's do it again. Maybe I'd do new line in front. There we go. All right. So now I've got date project A, date section 1. And so every time I'm clicking on a note, it's giving me the timestamp, or it's giving me the whatever, however I format it. And so
perfect.
You could stick the timing in there as well.
Yes, wonderful. This covers my context problem. Perfect.
Yeah. So that that's how I would do that. Mr. Rogers.
Can you demonstrate the navigation point? Was there a complaint at some point about Tinderbox not offering bidirectional linking, and what was bidirectional referring to in that context? Is it bidirectional?
Oh yeah, bidirectional in that context is this. Let's just pop to a map.
Is it a navigation thing?
No, yeah, no, it's this. So say I have 2 notes. Note 1, note 2. So what that individual was referring to is this. Can't freaking spell. Jeez. All right, there we go. So Tinderbox's notes are directional. So this case, this note's going from here to there. And let's use Art's example real quick. Now I'm going to draw a link from here to there. And I'm going to now make this untitled Art. Sorry. Untitled. Create link, right? And so what they wanted was one line that had an arrow on each end, not 2 arrows showing the directionality. That's what they were referring to.
So, but I'm trying to understand what the criticism is in that context. If it's bidirectional, that my impression is that you can navigate back and forth, whereas if it's only one direction, you can only go forward.
No, I have a feeling because of Visio and other note-taking tools or PowerPoint that they're used to, they want one line with an arrow on each end of the line.
So it was just
it's a semantic visual thing, and you get the same concept. I can navigate to inbound, outbound links. I can get all the navigation I want with Tinderbox. They just didn't like the visual of there having to be 2 links.
Okay, so when in that test file we had where we had Buzz Lightyear or whatever, Flash Buzz or whatever it was, Buzz Price,
Yeah.
you could be in the note where Buzz Price is mentioned in the text, click, and then you have to use Command 7 to see that he's linked to down there. I guess it would.
Where do we put it? Here as Buzz Price. Yep.
Okay, so oh, and then he pops up in a separate window.
No, he does. If you want, I was going to point that out. I can click on it and it takes me to Buzz Price.
Now, how do you go back to what?
And if you hit Command apostrophe and it will take you back.
Command apostrophe. Okay, so it's not in that command
Well,
7.
it is. It
Yes,
is
it
here.
is.
Oh,
It's right
It's
that's
an
there.
inbound link.
It's an
okay.
inbound. So it's inbound into Buzz. It's outbound out of this note.
So inbound Buzz is the note, and then outbound and then in the content. Okay.
So chapter 2 is going to Buzz. It's going from chapter 2 into Buzz.
Mm-hmm.
And the notes coming into Buzz is chapter
From
2.
chapter 2, and now clicking on that takes you back to chapter 2.
Right. And then this is what I really like about this methodology is that you then can have the pop-up. So in context, Peter, while you're doing your work, you create that link to Buzz. You can pop open that window, define some text about Buzz.
And how did you pop open that window?
The little down here, if you click the mouse, all you have to do is click the mouse and drag, and it opens up that window.
No, from the link. I mean, when you did it in the outbound.
You just hover over it.
Ah, okay.
And then you do that. So that way you can then add text and define Buzz within context. And the next time you mouse over Buzz, there's the context that you've written about him.
I'm learning a lot.
And the great thing about the tear off window is you can do this, move it off to the side, and then you can actually manipulate all of his attributes and have that window sitting there on the side as you're curating your work. And you can have multiples of these notes.
But I had it bigger than a 14-inch screen. Yeah.
That's why you need that's why you need the 49-inch beast that I've got. Right. So you can have multiples of these notes on the side where you can be curating all of these linked notes simultaneously while you're working on that one context.
This is very cool. We should have had this class a long time ago.
Honestly, we have like multiple times, but yeah. Yeah, so that's the other thing. And the other thing I wanted to show you, Peter, is if you then want to automate these kind of link creations, this is the latest create and link library file I created. So if I grab my installer, and I'm just going to drop it into our current project right now, grab my installer, launch the installer. So now it's installed all the appropriate libraries we need to make that automatic linking work. And then if you go up here, when you're doing your project or your work, you'll see that Tinderbox has automatically organized those notes, dropped in different people, dropped in different companies. And you'll notice the second I click on Michael, because of the files, the values that are in these attributes, Tinderbox automatically creates all of the related links, aka the companies that this person Michael's associated with, plus all of the terms that that person's associated with. And so later when you're doing your work, you can say like Acme Inc. And just to show you, you see there's no Acme Inc. here though. And now when I click away and come back, Acme Inc. automatically gets created.
Beautiful.
And then while you're doing your work, if you want to undelete, if you delete Acme Inc. in the note, you made a mistake or you changed your idea, the link to Acme Inc. disappears, but the note Acme Inc. still persists. And so that way you have this ability to kind of automatically create notes and all that. And that's that linking library that I've published through my school.
Okay, so not to belabor this point, but these are navigation affordances that when you click on a note, you can then visit other relevant pieces of information that are not contained in that note and quickly get back to the note you were in. That's the value of the link in that context. In the map, the link has some other value, I think. It is intended.
Let's look. So if I open up this note in a new tab, map view, the challenge with that is because the challenge with in this context, There actually, in this context, there is no notes in the container Michael Becker, so that map view is not going to work for us in this context. Where this would work more better would be new tab and hyperbolic view. Right. So now I can look at all of the notes related to Michael Becker. The different companies, the different terminology.
Can you filter those links?
Yeah, by turning off the different concepts. So here's just the companies.
And Mike, while you got it open, it's useful to. It's good because you can show it there. The cross, the right hand top right of the view, in the tick boxes, there's one called cross, and that's basically if you turn that off, it takes out any links crossing between other parts of the graph. So in a sense, if you just show tree, you were literally looking from this note in lines outwards.
Right. So here's all the notes lines outwards, and then when I click cross, okay, those don't have any cross linkings. You'll see these notes in here are actually linked to each other. They're both linked to me, but also linked to each other, and so that's the value of that.
And often, if you've got a very busy view, one of the other things is probably turning off the cross links may make it a bit more performant. If you've got an awful lot of links going on, so it can be helpful. Or you just have too many lines and you can't. That's the other thing. If you have so many lines that you can't really see what's what, then the lines begin to lose the visual salience they normally have.
All right. Yeah, so that's let's go back here. There you go. Yeah, so that's where the automation can really kick in a big way with Tinderbox. And then to show you some other capability while we're at it, let's say I go create. We'll go down here to new note. Let's just do this. Let's say I'm going to link. Let's do this manually here. And now I'm going to do it. Let me delete that one. Let's say I'm going to do here, and I'm going to call it person. And now I'm going to create a stamp. This one. So you see Michael Becker person is an inbound link to this. And I can say, let's make my text text equals, or better yet, because I think I have my email address in this. Let's make email here, and let's say email. Equals links dot inbound person email, right? So by doing that, I'm now passing data up and down the email chain. I'm saying any inbound links that are of a type person, give me the email address. And so then that can be a really, really powerful way for further automation and further management, especially if you're writing reports and you're wanting to populate that information into reports. It can be very, very powerful and drive a massive amount of efficiency in your work.
All right, so one more remedial linking for Dave Rogers. The zip link functionality with the two brackets or something.
Yeah, so that's called
you
the
have
zip
to know
link.
the name of the note you want to link to. Is that how that works?
Yeah, yes and no, but you need to know something, right? So if you go up here and I'm going to note and I just hit this, Tinderbox is going to immediately start popping up context, right? So I'm in a person note, so it's thinking I'm wanting to link to people notes, so it's giving me the other related people notes. However, if I start typing the word chapter, it will immediately start looking for notes related to what I'm typing. And then if I like chapter, I can go ahead here, and then I've got chapter. Right, and then I can click on that and then go back and forth.
Now, when you export to HTML, though the processor doesn't necessarily translate those links into the interior of the document. That would have to be handled separately in the export template.
Well, it can, and it will, if you're using the standard export the entire document and it's exported out its hierarchical structure. Then in that context, all of the relative links will work perfectly as designed because of Tinderbox basic architecture. However, if you go up and you hit export as a standalone file, that will export this individual note, but not necessarily any needed resources that it needs. There's a potential that link, so it will export the page, but because the page it's linking to doesn't exist in the exported file, then the link won't work. And there are other strategies around that. That's why if you go back into my school library in January, I published a internal anchors strategy for dealing with just that problem. If you've exported out an entire document as a standalone document and you want all of those relative reference links to work, what my anchor template does is it converts the relative links in the document to internal anchor links. So then that way it will the linking will work up and down in the chain of a larger document.
Does that, so when I export the Marmot, I have every other previous month in the archive is HTML do not export. So would that cause a hiccup? Can I just,
Hard to tell. It depends on your structure.
I'll play with it.
If you have a link, so the first thing I put in the sidebar is I think they confused a lot of people. So this whole zip thing started when all the Markdown people turned up and were complaining that Tinderbox wasn't built on Markdown and the world was ending. For some people who've only ever used that, literally the only way they know how to make a link is double square brackets. That's their understanding what a link is. So Tinderbox essentially allows that to happen and actually adds some quite useful extra functionality to it. But it is just a way to make a standard text link. It is exactly the same as you typing some text, selecting it and dragging a link or any other method that makes a text link. So when you export the note, it is a text link that goes to or will go to another note if that note is exported. Now, if you've linked to a note that is set to not export, this note, when you export it, will not create a link because there's nothing for it to link to because there is no counterparty exported page at the other end. So the other thing is if you build composite pages, you can't create a link to a note that you're actually going to export as a sort of include into another note because in your mind's eye you think it's simple, but you could end up with sort of essentially the same include going in several pages, and then you've got one note, one page trying to link to 4 other pages using one note, and that's not how HTML rolls. So there are a few limitations, but ostensibly, if you have a link in this note to another note and both of them are exporting to HTML, then that link will export, whether you made it using the zip method or any other method.
By the way, yeah.
When I normally
go ahead.
when I normally link to myself, I just link to the already exported archive file, and because that's simple enough. I just wondered if there was a little handy way to do it without that, but this is fine.
By the way, Mr. Bernstein, too, if you see here, I'm toying with the whole onboarding idea too. Like once you install an installer and you get new steps, start here, do this, do that, and giving instructions. And it includes, I think this one, this one actually includes video, so that people can, so that's the start of that onboarding stuff that we've been doing from the backstage. Mr. Bruce.
This is going back a minute or two, but when you talked about export and HTML, if I remember right, you also said you can't go into Microsoft Word with the HTML because it messes it up, but you can use Google Docs.
No, you can go to Word. No, You absolutely
Let's
can.
say I don't really want to go to Word actually. So if it's Google Docs I'm interested in, so I can just export the HTML code into Google Docs and that will preserve the links.
It can. Again, it depends on the nature of your HTML. So if you have, and this is why I built my internal anchor link template. So if you, and it totally depends on the nature and structure of your project. But if you have, if you create a standalone document and then you apply the anchor link template, it changes the links from relative references to anchors in HTML. And so what an anchor is in the HTML is it essentially says this spot in the document is the anchor. Anytime anybody clicks on that link, jump to this spot in the document, as opposed to exiting the document and going to a different document. And that's what the whole anchor templating strategy was for.
What it won't do, Bruce, is if you've written 2 notes and you've taken the HTML and you've put those into 2 Google Docs, and in Tinderbox one of the notes has a link to the other one, that note that won't work because it has no idea what the actual address of the Google Doc is.
Right.
So
No,
so I mean it's a natural limitation you can't easily build around. You could write extra code. It's as simple if you really had the need, if you knew that the pages you were creating were all going to say be on your website, and you essentially knew where, if all those pages were going to live in the same folder on your website, you could construct the links in such a way they will work. But to your simple answer, if note A links to note B and you paste the copy of note A, the HTML of of note A into one Google Doc and note B into another Google Doc, you will not find a functional link from note A to note B in the Google Docs.
this was and that's helpful. This was more navigation within the Google Doc.
Within a document.
So
and that's where the anchoring.
So anchors will help there. Yeah.
That's where anchoring comes into play.
okay, because you can always use it as headers and create a table of contents too, but that's only kind of a one-way process. What I also need is that when I'm in one section that I want to allow someone to easily reference the other section and go back and forth.
Right. Let me show you an example of that.
I mean, I don't want to pull us away from what's been
No,
going
it's all
on.
part of the same idea of linking. All right. So let me see. Have I done it on this one? I think I'm doing it in this one. Let me double check here. Right. So right now, yeah. So if you see here, I'm using my internal anchoring template. So what's happening is rather than doing relative references for the links, I have Tinderbox automatically doing a pound X and the ID number of the note. And so the template is actually generating that ID number. And so that way, if you jump down to, and I think this is curation. So if I jump down to curation, you'll see here H0IDX. So this is the anchor. So the anchor says my ID is X, my node ID number. And so then in turn,
what is heading 0? I've never used that.
It's a custom ID I made for myself.
Thank you.
Right. So if you use, so essentially what anchoring is you say some kind of heading like H1, H2, P tag, image tag, doesn't matter. So any of your HTML tags, if you say ID equals and then give it a unique number, then when you reference to that item, just do it here. When you reference to that item, you do AAHref, that ID number, and that's how internal linking within a document works.
Okay.
Right. And this internal linking template is what does that for you. It took me a while to figure it out. And there's and getting the whole relative referencing right is a challenge, but that's.
So you're saying that's not only internal to Tinderbox, but that methodology will transport into Google Docs or Word?
This is the standard of HTML. That's an HTML standard. That's not a Tinderbox standard. and Tinderbox is effectively outputting HTML. So so it works.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And then again, for those that are care, now the images, I don't remember. I don't think the images come over, but this is if for those that don't want to, you need templates to be able to export. But if we do this file, no, not sheets, docs. Creating a new doc. So I'm just creating a new doc here. So then I go over here. And what I do is I do a Control-A copy, paste, and then there's my document. The reason why the images aren't coming over is because of browser security, because these are absolute references to files on my hard drive, and browser security keeps a browser from having permissions on that. And in this context, the pasting didn't bring those links over, but if I actually exported the HTML and then imported in the HTML, it would have worked. I'd have to play around with that a little bit more. But that's a quick way to do exporting. All right. Got about 5 minutes left. Anybody else have any other thoughts, comments, questions, curiosities? Philip, you've been gone for a while. What's going on? And what inspired you to come back and say hi to us all?
Yeah, I'm now in Cambodia. That's what's been going on. I'm in Chip Penop.
Nice.
Yes, it is. It's been a big change in my life. I'm loving it. It's a wonderful, amazing, a beautiful country, is all I can say.
I've been twice. I love it. Cambodia's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's just mind-blowing, beautiful. Of course, poverty, corruption, it's all here. Terrible pollution. But tomorrow I'm going down to the coast. I'll hop on a little boat to go to a small island for a few days because we have the Khmer New Year here. But I'm teaching here in a Australian sort of connected language school. I have about 100 students a week from the ages of about, the youngest is about 11 or 12 years old, the oldest, and so lots of teenagers, uni students. Yeah, amazing. So
Now, one thing I like about Cambodia, it happens several places in the world, but their major river actually reverses,
yes,
right?
well,
And
yes.
that helps with trade. So for a big
Mm,
chunk of the year, it goes north to south, and then at some point during the year, it changes, and its flow then goes south to north, and that's
yeah.
really facilitated Cambodian trade.
Yep. Well, that's the Tonlai Sap. So we're on the where the Tonlai Sap and the Mekong River come together. That's where Phnom Penh is. And
Okay.
yes, so that's through the monsoon rains where it flows back upstream into the Tonlai Sap Lake up near Siem Reap, so Angkor Wat. And then when the rainy season ends in November, the flow comes back down this way towards the coast. And they have a huge big festival here around, well, in the city with millions of people here. Yeah. So I've been here about 7 months, and it's been a tough decision because my oldest daughter is still in Maine at the College of the Atlantic, and my youngest daughter's in Australia with friends at a school. So I'm alone in Southeast Asia. Yes. And why did I come back on? Yeah, I've just nostalgia maybe, yes, but also yes, because with 100 students a week, and I'm seeing them up to 3 times a week. Yeah, there's not much time for much else right now. And with climate and everything, it is tough living here. Um, Going from air-conditioned places out into I mean, at the moment it's the hottest time of year. Um, but no, it's been an amazing moment. Getting to, thankfully, I've also in the school have the majority of the teachers are actually Cambodian teachers, so which is what I wanted to be in a multilingual situation where there's a lot of sort of cultural contact with the teachers, learning from them, and yeah, and also these young Cambodian teenagers through social media. They're using all the Gen Z slang, and I
Really?
praise them for it because they're using Khmer and then the Gen Z slang they're picking up. Very smart. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, one of my
Um,
favorite experiences ever was I did like a 5:45 a.m., 6 a.m. meditation session on top of a temple in Angkor Wat, overlooking the jungle as the sun was coming up, and there wasn't another human being in for miles. It was
yeah,
it was very cool.
Yeah, no, I'm going down to the coast because it's just here everywhere right now with the Khmer New Year, and you get soaked when you go outside. It's the water fights, flour, yeah, but it's good. And on an interesting concept is to learn about the amazing influence of Indian culture. I mean, having spent so much time in Europe and then to be here. So here in the National Museum is the oldest known representation of zero. It's carved on a stone. And it's the first known written representation of zero that the concept of zero was brought down here by the Indians. You know,
Could you
from
send me,
India.
could you send me a link on that? My daughter actually did a paper in college on zero and she loved it.
Okay.
So if you could send me that, email me or drop that
Yeah.
link in the chat, that'd be awesome.
I actually heard about it in a podcast when I came here last year. A journalist wrote a very interesting book. I can't remember what it's called right now, but a very interesting book. I think was it called The Golden Road, comparing these trade routes, this transfer of knowledge, down through south from India down the Mekong River, right through to Indonesia, Malaysia, Indonesia, through Cambodia, and I think he called it the Golden Road. A phenomenal, just totally mind-blowing, phenomenal. The representations through elephants and things that are so different from Europe. Yeah. I'm a big fan, just totally enjoying it and looking forward to getting down to one of the nice islands tomorrow. Tomorrow, yes, in all 12 hours I leave, I think. Yeah. Yeah, and I just haven't had time to do much else right now. But yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Welcome back.
yes, thank you. Yeah. And my oldest daughter, though, she's about to finish her second year, and she's just worried about what to do right now with America and Donald Trump and being on a student visa. The concept of leaving America to come and visit me here or visit Australia or visit friends in India. She's got friends in India. She's very concerned about it as a German Australian.
I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday that had a very renowned Swiss professor who's teaching here in the US. His wife lives here. He got detained at the border for like 2 to 4 hours and interrogated as he was coming in, just like last couple weeks, for like, are you overstaying your visa? And he's like, dude, I freaking live here and I work here. Come on. Yeah, but yeah, he had a whole overstaying the visa challenge.
Yeah, so she's actually considering going back to Germany. I'm just thinking, just with her scholarship at the College of the Atlantic, I mean, just financially, she's in a very good situation. But anyhow, at the end of the day, she has to know what she feels comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a strange feeling. I mean, my wife is buried at the Munich, the cemetery in Munich, in Bavaria, Germany. My oldest daughter is in Maine. My youngest daughter is now in Geelong, a large city near Melbourne, so down the south, and I'm here. It's emotionally, it's been a very big transition and a huge challenge.
But you can also always come back to your Tinderbox family, and we're here for you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
awesome.
Well, that's what I thought because there's just so much going on here. That yeah, this has been sort of a nice sense of a place. Yes, yes, yeah. So that's where I've been.
Fabulous. All right.
Yes.
We're welcome back. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. I found that a link, by the way, to that zero the placard you were showing. I dropped it in the chat. Anybody else have any final comments before we head out for the week? All right, and Mr. Rogers, thank you for giving us a topic to drive the whole session.
I learned a
great
lot.
meeting.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
See
Have a great
everybody.
week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.